our government guest today, of course, thought he was coming on the programme to talk about the government's asylum seekers policy. I promise I will get to that, of course. But really this evening is dominated by that resignation of Lord Geidt. We're joined now by the Home Office Minister, Tom Pursglove, to see if you can shed any light on what happened. Do we know why Lord Geidt has decided to step down?
Well, Sophie, I've been, I have to say, touring the television studios this evening, talking about the latest developments with regard to Rwanda. So I haven't seen a huge amount on this. But, of course, Lord Geidt has a distinguished career in public service in a number of roles. I think we're surprised as a government that he's taken the decision that he has. And, of course, it'll be for him to set out in more detail the reasons for why he's reached the conclusion to resign that he has. But I'm sorry to see him go and thank him for his service.
You know, you're saying about how it's a surprise for Number 10, that's what we've been briefed as well, this resignation. But at the same time, you know, he did go in front of this committee, didn't he, saying that he was frustrated with some of the responses to Partygate. He's previously said that there was legitimate questions over whether the Prime Minister broke the ministerial code after receiving this fine over Partygate. It feels like he felt his position was untenable defending the Prime Minister, doesn't it?
I think Lord Geidt would need to speak for himself. Obviously, it has been an eventful few weeks that we've seen. I think the Prime Minister has been very clear consistently that in terms of what happened with regard to gatherings in Number 10, he's apologised unreservedly for that. I think we now need to move forward and get on with the job of governing. Certainly in my own constituency, but also when I go around the country and campaigning in the by-election, for example, I've heard a lot of people saying that they just want government to get on with the job of governing. They want the opposition to talk about the issues that matter as well. I think that's where our focus should now be. But it's right that Lord Geidt sets those matters out in his own terms, in his own way, in a way of his choosing. At
the same time, though, it does feel as though perhaps Lord Geidt had reached the end of his tether defending Boris Johnson. They've had run-ins before, haven't they, over the refurbishment of the Downing Street flat when the Prime Minister failed to disclose messages between himself and a Conservative peer who paid for the renovations. Lord Geidt said that demonstrated insufficient respect for his role. The frustrations with Boris Johnson have been well documented.
I think that Lord Geidt has been very professional in his dealings and the work that he's done, and he's obviously reached a conclusion that he wishes to resign, and that's what he's done, and it'll be for him to set out the reasons why, if that's what he wishes to do.
I completely understand that you can't put words in his mouth. We haven't really got a statement yet from Lord Geidt explaining those reasons, and so I appreciate the position you're in. At the same time, though, Lord Geidt is the second person to have resigned from this job under Boris Johnson's premiership. I mean, he's only been Prime Minister for 3 years. Sir Alex Allen quit in 2020 after Mr Johnson refused to accept his finding that Home Secretary Priti Patel had bullied civil servants. It doesn't look good, does it, to lose not one but two ethics advisors?
Again, I'm not going to get drawn on this. I've not had much opportunity to familiarise myself with
what
has happened.
We know that two people have resigned from this.
Frankly, I haven't got a sort of in-depth knowledge of previous holders of the role and for how long they've held the position for. You know, clearly there are term lengths sometimes involved in public appointments and people decide to serve for a particular length of time. There may be personal reasons that he's decided not to continue. I don't know, and it would be wrong for me to speculate.
Finally, some people might be looking at this thinking, it shouldn't be Lord Geidt resigning over this, it should be Boris Johnson. He's been fired by the police for breaking the rules. 148 of his own MPs has said that they've got no confidence in him, and he's now lost two ethics advisors.
I don't think the Prime Minister should resign. He was given an overwhelming mandate in that 2019 general election. He delivered Brexit. He's got us through the pandemic. The vaccination rollout was a huge success, and the government played a part in delivering that. We're now emerging from COVID-19. We're dealing with the situation in Ukraine. We've got the cost of living challenges. And I work with him on the illegal migration issue week in, week out. And I know how determined he is to get to grips with that. I think that for the Prime Minister, there is still a lot more to give. He is committed to getting on with the day job, delivering on the promises that we made. And I know that's what he's determined to do.
Even if I will move on to Rwanda, but even if you lose both of the by-elections coming up in Wakefield and Tiverton, he's the man for the job.
By-elections are unpredictable. I mean, I obviously represent the Corby constituency. We had a by-election in 2012. Labour took the seat off us. I got the seat back 2.5 years later, having worked tirelessly for 2 years campaigning, and it just shows the unpredictability that there is. And we've got two very good candidates who are working hard. I hope that they're going to be able to convince people in those communities to vote for them and vote Conservative. I'm backing them, and I'll be working to support them over the coming days to do just that.
OK, let's talk Rwanda. Priti Patel, of course, making it pretty clear she wants to push ahead with the policy of sending asylum seekers to Rwanda after it was blocked in the courts. When do you hope the first plane to take off?
Well, I can't comment on those operational specifics of when that plane might take off, but we are talking about a matter of weeks. We've been consistently clear that we need to deliver on this policy objective. We can't continue to have people making perilous journeys across the Channel, facilitated by evil criminal gangs, undercutting, of course, people coming via safe and legal means.
Let's come in there. What are the safe and legal means? If you're not from Ukraine or Afghanistan, where there are clear routes to the UK, how do you claim asylum? Because if you look at the government's advice, you know, that it says that you should apply for asylum when you arrive in the UK, but it also says your claim effectively won't be considered if you've travelled to the UK through a safe third country. I mean, it's basically impossible to claim asylum legally, isn't it?
Well, the point is that what we do is we respond to global crises as they emerge, and we have bespoke schemes that are in place to provide the support that we want to give. And I think we have a proud tradition.
So if you're not from Ukraine and you're not from Afghanistan, what is the safe and legal route for you to claim asylum in the UK?
Well, there's further examples. Look at, for example, the response to the Hong Kong BNO situation. Look at the response to the Syria crisis, where we accommodated 20,000 people. How can you say that it's going to be a deterrent for the people in France currently when there isn't another route for them to claim asylum? All of those people, Sophie, are leaving what are fundamentally safe countries to make perilous journeys. The idea that France is not a safe country. Well, one of the things we do, for example, is we work with the UNHCR in refugee camps in areas around the world to provide resettlement opportunities for people. Obviously, the UNHCR do have a lot of experience in handling those cases, in identifying particular vulnerabilities where we can make the biggest impact in terms of our help. I think that's the right approach, so that in response to individual crises, we make the best possible schemes that are as generous as possible. We've seen that in response to Ukraine in recent weeks and the generosity of the British people. But I also think if we can help the most vulnerable people on the face of the planet, that's precisely what we should do.
I just want to read the UK government's current travel advice to Rwanda. It says homosexuality isn't illegal in Rwanda, but it remains frowned on by many. LGBT individuals can experience discrimination and abuse, including from local authorities. There are no specific anti-discrimination laws that protect LGBT individuals. Are you comfortable sending people to a country where, according to your own advice, they can experience discrimination and abuse, including from local authorities?
Well, actually, there's a fundamental principle that cuts through the Rwandan constitution that deals with anti-discrimination. And you mentioned the travel advice from the FCDO, but we've also conducted a comprehensive country report on Rwanda that deals with all of these matters. That work is carried out by a reputable team that actually the courts have regularly commended the quality of the work that is done as being authoritative in terms of those country-by-country reports. And it's also just worth pointing out that the UNHCR place people in Rwanda for the purposes of providing sanctuary, which I think gives quite a strong indication about how they feel about people being safe. In fact, there's representatives of the UNHCR who are on the record saying Rwanda is a safe environment for refugees. But of course, in the end, the fundamental principle that we work through in this policy is that people will only be relocated if it is safe and appropriate for them. It's right that we take case-by-case decisions, taking proper account of people's circumstances.
Just finally, there's been some frustration from some of your colleagues about the ruling by the European Court of Human Rights. Do you think it's time to look at pulling out?
So the Prime Minister said that we will rule nothing out and that we're going to have to look at this because we've got to deliver on this policy. We've made a commitment. We're determined to deliver on this. And I would argue that there's lives at stake if we don't follow through on this policy.
You're leaving the door open to it?
But the difficulty we've got at the moment is obviously the European Court of Human Rights has handed down a ruling, but we haven't been even provided with the detail of that ruling and the underpinning rationale behind it. So when I left the office earlier...
All it's saying, my understanding, is that you should just wait until the actual judgment, which is in, July?
I don't think it's unreasonable for us as ministers to want to see all of that information properly presented and in full so that we can make judgments about what is appropriate in terms of next steps. But the Prime Minister said that we don't rule out having to change our domestic law, for example, if that's what's necessary in order to facilitate this. The thing is, if we don't, we'll just continue to have these criminal gangs exploiting people, taking their money, all the risk to life. We lost 27 lives in the Channel in November, 39 people in the back of a lorry in Grays in Essex a few years ago. That is what keeps me awake at night, frankly, as the illegal migration minister. We've got to get to grips with it. Failure is simply not an option.
OK, thank you very much for being on the programme, Tom Pursglove.